Okay, where does horizontal pushing and pulling fall into our neurodevelopmental sequence, or even within the neurodevelopmental strength progression? And we can find different postures that we see that take place in, specifically in quadruped and sitting, but where we really start to develop our horizontal pushing and pulling is out of our seated postures. Any of our seated postures will work. Typically, this shin box works well, or V-sit works well. Today we're just going to run through the shin box real quick, but you can explore whatever seated positions that you want. Why we get into this and why the seated positions work best and serve as our entry point into our horizontal pushing and pulling is because when we first get into our seated position, we're propped up on our arms. And we're doing that because we don't have enough stability to maintain an upright trunk. Now, Jeff's no longer an infant, so he's just demonstrating this. But as that infant develops enough midline and pelvic stability, what happens is we go into an unsupported seated position, where the entire goal of that is to free the hands up to interact with our environment and space, which turns into reaching for objects and pulling them back towards us. So if we take those principles and apply it to how we load things up, we're going to take our kettlebell, it's going to be our resistance and our load, and now all Jeff is doing is using his hands to push and pull that bell and trace the shape of his legs out of the shin box position. His trunk is constantly changing, his pelvis is constantly adapting, he's having to have his scapula communicate well with his thoracic spine as well as his upper extremities so that he can generate a motor program to where he can accomplish this pushing and pulling with the resistance that we've provided to him out of this posture. That work?
That works great.
Oh! Crap, I forgot to do the...
Talk anything about the...
Now we do the one where we push and lift up and over and then lead into that. While you're on film? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you hit it well. Method acting is at its finest. That's a Tony. You should get a Tony for that. All right, once we've gotten into and done some of the pushing and pulling stuff and keeping the bell on the ground, now we can add another level of complexity to this, or we can think of it as a way to integrate it a little bit more into actually picking things up off the ground. So we can do the same thing he was doing before. So go ahead and push it around that right leg. Now once we get there, pick it up. Good. And now go the other way. So now we can start picking the bell up and moving the bell, because now we're having to generate stability completely different than before, where that bell was staying on the ground. And we had the ability to push that bell down into the ground to generate some stability off of this. Now the only way Jeff's going to be able to lift that bell off the ground is if he can push his ischial tuberosities down into the ground to create enough stability to allow him to leverage that bell up.